Hey, this is Mrs. Reichelt, and today's podcast we're going to be talking about cells and organelles. So, cells are the basic unit of life. There are three parts to the cell theory. The first is that cells are the basic unit of life. Next is that living things come from one or more cells. So, living things are made up of one or more cells. And then last, cells come from pre-existing cells. So each of those makes up the cell theory. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit more about cells and tissues. So cells are going to carry out all the chemical activities needed to sustain life. Cells are going to be, again, the basic unit of life, the basic unit of structure and function of an organism. And then tissues are groups of cells that are similar in structure and in function. Okay, the generalized cell. So a generalized cell means that most cells are going to have these three regions. The first are going to be the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and a plasma membrane. Or instead of plasma membrane, you could say cell membrane. But basically, we know that cells are not all the same. They don't all look like this generalized cell structure. And all cells have some characteristics that are similar. They have some general structures or general characteristics. So let's go ahead and go into the nucleus. So the nucleus is the control center of the cell. The nucleus contains genetic material or DNA. There are three regions. We have the nuclear envelope. The nuclear envelope is sometimes called the nuclear membrane. Okay, we're going to go through a little bit of detail, so I'm going to draw it up here. Okay, so the nuclear envelope, basically, that's going to be a barrier between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. So the nuclear envelope is going to be this pink area here. So that'll be the barrier. The nuclear envelope is made up of nuclear pores. The nuclear pores are going to be all of these little things. Okay, they're going to be pores that are connecting the cytoplasm with the interior of the nucleus. Next up here, we have the nucleolus. The nucleolus is this densely packed area. Okay, so the nucleolus is the site for ribosome assembly. And then ribosomes are going to move through these nuclear pores to get out to the cytoplasm. And then lastly, we have the chromatin. Chromatin condenses to form chromosomes when the cell is going to go under cell division, or that's the prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. Chromatin is present when cells are not dividing. They're composed of DNA and protein. And chromatin is scattered throughout the nucleus. So chromatin is going to be all throughout the nucleus. So that wraps up the nucleus. Let's move on to the phospholipid bilayer. The phospholipid bilayer is a barrier for the cell's contents. It contains a double phospholipid bilayer. So this means you have it'll look something like this. You have your polar heads on one side, the hydrophobic tails on the inside, followed with another polar layer, which gives you a barrier from the inside versus the outside. Phospholipid bilayers also contain proteins, cholesterol, and glycoproteins. Okay, let's go into a little bit of detail here. So, each of these gray molecules, I guess I can draw one out, represents a phospholipid. This is going to be polar. The phospholipid heads are going to be polar, which means they are water-loving. And then the tails are non-polar. Okay, then we have, let's see, our cholesterol right here. I'm circling those. Those are going to be in yellow. Cholesterol, what those do, those prevent cells from, or the phospholipid bilayer from changing shape too much. So that means in warmer temperatures, cells want to move around even more. The cholesterol makes it so they can't really move too much. They can't get out of order or disassociate from their cell. In addition, if the cells gets too cold, they pack tightly together. Cholesterol will make it so they can't condense too much. Then we have our proteins. Let's find those. Proteins are in purple. We have integral proteins and peripheral proteins. These ones right here are going to be peripheral. Peripheral means that it doesn't go all the way through the phospholipid bilayer. Here's an example of an integral protein. Okay, proteins are going to act as membrane transport where molecules can go in and out of the cell that way. And then lastly, we have our glycoproteins. Those are in green. Glycoproteins are a sugar group. They're going to act as a cell recognition. So the surface of the cell is fuzzy or sticky with a sticky coating. This is what determines blood type, these glycoproteins. In addition, they have receptors that bacteria and viruses can bind to. So be aware of that. Let's see here. And let's go ahead and move into membrane junctions. So there are three major types of membrane junctions. The first is going to be a tight junction. Tight junctions are these top ones. So I'm going to just label the. Okay, they're these little pink things if you still are kind of confused. So each of these little pink dots represents a tight junction. Tight junction are impermeable junctions. What this means is each of these cells bind together and they make leak-proof sheets. Okay, so that means that they're waterproof. Nothing's going to be able to get into those. The second, so that's number one. The second type of junction, which is right here, are called desmosomes. Desmosomes to me look like plant roots. Okay, so you see all these little purple stringy looking plant root material, okay, coming out from those pink centers. Desmosomes are functioning to anchor to prevent cells from being pulled apart. And then the last type of junction are these red ones. These are called gap junctions. A gap junction is where you have two cells that are connected by hollow tubes These hollow tubes allow for communication between cells. So membrane junctions are going to be the way that cells are bound together. There are three types. You have tight junctions, desmosomes, and gap junctions. Okay, so the cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the material outside of the nucleus and inside of the plasma membrane. Cytoplasm contains three major elements. We have cytosol. Cytosol is going to be the fluid that suspends other elements. Organelles are the metabolic machinery. So that's going to be the metabolic machinery. Sometimes they're called little organs. And then the last are inclusions. These are going to be chemical substances that are stored as nutrients or cell products.